tried to say it in the offseason, but nobody wanted to listen to me. This Oklahoma team was good enough to be a top 10 team by the end of the year. Everyone laughed at me when I made that statement. And heck, I almost believed it when talking about this game coming into the week. I ended up picking Texas, which blatantly was a mistake. But one thing that never made sense to me this week, a lot of people, including my own co-host Sean Anderson, saying that this game was going to be a blowout, that Texas was going to boat race Oklahoma, when in reality, Oklahoma was going to provide a massive challenge because they are yet to face an offense and a quarterback this competent. Everybody that they've dealt with this year has been nowhere near the level of Dillon Gabriel, and we were exposed to a guy that deserves to be in the conversation for the Heisman. That's my first major takeaway from this Texas-Oklahoma game. We need to start talking about Dillon Gabriel for the Heisman Trophy. The way that he played in this game, he has been playing consistent and strong football so far this year. But in this game in particular, he took over and stepped up and made plays when he needed to. His final stat line ends up being 23 for 38, 285 yards and a touchdown. But where it's even more impressive is that he goes 14 carries for 113 yards and 8.1 yards per carry average with one touchdown and a long of 44 yards. He, most importantly, when you have the stat line provided by the context of the plays that he made throughout the game, I think it makes that number even more impressive. That there were tons of drives where that stellar Texas defensive line was in his face, was pressuring him, and he didn't flinch. He didn't back down. He delivered throws. Even on that final play, that final touchdown pass that he threw was an example of the composure that he has in the pocket. And the fact that he is an undersized quarterback, and for him to be able to make those plays, to extend plays with his legs, pick up long rushing extensions to continue drives, he was the defining factor and the deciding factor for why Oklahoma won this football game. And I think that if Dillon Gabriel can string together other strong performances the rest of the year, they're going to run the table and be an undefeated team. Their defensive performance, the way that they played, is reminiscent of what Clemson was able to do when Brent Venables was their defensive coordinator. That defensive front is aggressive, and they got after an offensive line for Texas that is supposed to be one of the best in the country. I really do believe with Oklahoma's remaining schedule, with how weak the Big 12 is, they're in the best position to finish the year undefeated and to possibly win the Big 12. I will say this, however, one of the most important things that I always bring up is that when two teams play each other twice, very typically it's split. Usually the team that wins the first time does not win the second time, because in the game of football, and college football especially, it is nearly impossible to beat a good team twice. And that Texas team is still good. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that Texas team is bad. A couple things didn't go their way. Quinn Erres made a couple of mistakes, which I will get to in a second. But they are still a really well-rounded, contending team that will be in that discussion at the end of the year, depending on how the rest of the top 10 ends up shaking out. Like, I'm not going to move them out of my top 10. They deserve to still remain in that top 10 spot. But my point is, here with Oklahoma and Texas, they will meet again in the Big 12 championship game. We have not seen any other teams in the Big 12 play anywhere near that level of football of either of those programs. This is a very, very down year for the Big 12. It is a slop fest, especially if from what we saw Friday night between Oklahoma State and Kansas State. Kansas State's supposed to be one of the better teams in the conference, and they looked like a complete mess. And Oklahoma State themselves have been a complete mess this season. Oklahoma and Texas will face off again, and I would be very wary that Texas could potentially and likely win that game because they lost this first one. It is a lot more advantageous to go back to the drawing board, to be able to pull back up what didn't work, what mistakes do we need to correct to put ourselves in a position to win that second time around when you play each other again. That might end up cannibalizing the Big 12, though. You might end up having 2 one-loss teams and assuming that the rest of the top 4 for the college football playoff, assuming that they don't have any losses, it might push the Big 12 out of that convo. I will say this, though. Texas's success and why I'm very concerned if they can finish the year unscathed is that Quinn Ewers is far too volatile for Texas or to feel confident in Texas running the table, finishing the year without a loss. Because early in this game, he made a really silly interception, a decision where he hesitated on making a bad decision and then proceeded to make that bad decision. The second interception, not as much on him. It was a ball that hit a guy in the hands, bounced out, and was picked off. But he also ended up having a fumble because he couldn't protect the football when he was trying to scramble and pick up some extra yards on a play later on in the game. His mistakes are extremely frustrating, and that volatility is so impactful for the outcome of games. Your defense can play a stellar game, which they did. They played a really good game despite what the final score says. And even your running backs played really well. Your receivers played really well. Even if everything else is perfect, his decision-making and his also mistake-making is going to hold them back. If he has another meltdown type game like this, they will lose another game to a team that they're not supposed to. I don't know who that is off of the top of my head, but there is going to be a team in the Big 12 down the line that is mediocre, that he makes a couple of silly mistakes and then they lose. That's the biggest part here, is that Quinn Ewers is not the type of guy that makes a mistake and then bounces back. He is the type of quarterback that makes another mistake and then another mistake and then another mistake, and they lose the football game because of those errors. We'll have to see what ends up happening. Comment below. Let me know what you think. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back with more. Make sure you check out Bet Online for all of your sports betting needs. For anything that I do betting related, I go on over to betonline.ag and I use promo code BELIEVE50. BetOnline has all of the latest updated odds for the NFL and college football seasons. Anything you need, whether it's futures, live in-game betting, no matter what, your football betting needs are met at BetOnline. And again, make sure you use that promo code BELIEVE50, BLEAV50 to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts.